All right. Welcome back to Green Rush Live. We do this every Friday afternoon from 4 to 6 p.m. We follow our 6 p.m. show with our weekly Weed Talk News program that I anchor, and I welcome in as many as 7 state correspondents to give their input and roundup from all over the country, because my vision has always been to connect both coasts with cannabis talk. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media. Every Friday, I'm joined by
David Rabinovich.
There he is. And David did a fine job last week, as did Kurt Dalton, filling in for me. So I actually got to enjoy a day off in the great state of Maine. Joining us here on this half hour are 3 distinguished gentlemen. One is Will Lazier. He's the director of compliance for Tootster. He's an attorney, and he's a good friend of Pro Cannabis Media. Will, always good to see you. Thank you again. Omar Sachirbe from MJ Biz Daily, one of our favorite outlets, is also here with us. Omar, good to see you again.
Good to be here. Thanks.
And we want to welcome a rookie to the program. His name is Randall Meyer. He's the executive director of the Global Alliance for Cannabis Commerce. Now, Randall, explain to me exactly what you do and what the Global Alliance for Cannabis Commerce is all about.
Awesome. So the Global Alliance for Cannabis Commerce is a trade organization for cannabis businesses in the space. We represent a number of businesses from DNA Genetics to Urban Leaf to Raw Garden, if for something that most viewers might be familiar with as a particular brand. Our job is to try to improve the business conditions for the cannabis industry federally. Right now, I think we can all agree that the current condition of federal laws is not conducive to the growth of the cannabis industry. It is just not intended to help it in any way whatsoever. So our job is to try to turn it exactly the opposite and make sure that both parties are focusing on helping out our industry and advancing as much as we can for not only the industry interests, but also the criminal justice interests, because that does get wrapped up in there. I get asked all the time from Republican members when it comes up, why does the criminal justice interest come in from an industry advocacy organization? And the answer is, everyone's still violating the federal law. You can hear some sirens in the background, and that's the motorcade coming through for Washington, D.C., where I am. But a lot of the viewers on the show might know those sirens for an entirely different sound, and it's not something that's used for conducive business environments. So we work to make sure that the Republican Party understands that businesses, even businesses in their states, businesses they're taking political support from, are businesses that are doing the same crimes that they're concerned about from a criminal justice perspective. And that really helps advance that sort of conversation. So those are really what we work on from GACC. We work on making sure both parties get that we need a vibrant, competitive American industry that has a sensitivity to its history and criminal justice issues.
Absolutely. And that's awesome. And Omar and Will, I'm going to get comments from you about that COA bill that the big 3 of the U.S. Senate on the Democratic side introduced a few weeks ago. Omar, I'm sure you have perused all 163 pages, and you probably picked out a few things that you're saying, are they nuts? What's your impressions of that bill? And the million-dollar question, of course, is, does it have any shot, and what might come out of this?
Sure. So it's, I think on the one hand, symbolically very positive, because we're seeing, one of the most august bodies in American politics and American society significantly move the needle on legalization. Even if it doesn't pass, this is a major step. Granted, there have been other proposals that have gotten some traction. We had the MORE Act several months ago, a year ago, give or take. That was a big push forward. A lot of people would argue, rightfully, I think, that this is a more substantial push just because of the timing and who it's coming from, Chuck Schumer, and just all the publicity that it's been getting. So again, symbolically, a very positive step. My opinion, boy, that's hard to relate. I can say what some other people have told me what they think about it. There is, a lot of concern about a few things in there. I think most notably is the tax rate. I think we're looking at something that's going to go up to 25% over something like 5 years. And if the idea or if one of the ideas of legalization is to get rid of the illicit market, a 25% tax rate is not going to do that. And the MORE Act that I just mentioned a minute ago, I think the top tax rate on that is something like 8%. You'll have to check out articles from my excellent colleague, Jeff Smith, who has been writing about that and has the precise numbers. But that's a huge difference. So I could go on for a long time about the tax rate. You look at other states where, again, the tax rates are high. You see that the illicit market still thrives there. California, Oregon, even in Washington State, where I think it's, when you put everything together, we're looking up, something past 20%, maybe as close as 30%. So again, bottom line, a tax rate like that is not going to help get rid of the illicit market, and it's also going to be bad for businesses. And just one last word on taxes. A lot of good news, it's being received rightfully as good news that 280E is going to be eliminated with this. But again, with the 25% tax rate, whatever gains there are from getting rid of 280E, they're going to be lost again with that tax rate.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised, Omar, if in fact, when they were sitting down and crunching the numbers, that's exactly what they looked at. They looked at 280E and said, oh, well, they pay so much under that tax provision, we can throw on more taxes. All it told me,
100% agree.
The individuals in the Senate who are proposing and pushing this bill understand so little about the marijuana industry, it's almost laughable that they put the bill together.
Right. Well, it's one of the reasons why the NCIA exists, the NACB exists, and also Randall's group as well. Will, I want to get your opinions, your feedback, what you see, and as someone who understands the importance of leverage, what is the leverage that the Democrats might have here where they might be able to find some common ground on the other side of the aisle?
I'm not sure that's going to happen. I think if by some hook or crook, and pardon the expression to use the word crook, Mitch McConnell is no longer in charge of the Republicans in the Senate, you might have a possibility. But he said absolutely he's not in favor of legalization. I think this is just a discussion document, and there are several good things in it. Obviously, the tax rate is something that's very bad. And, I think that those tax rates on top of state tax rates, and Omar is right, I think the effective tax rate in Washington is about 37%. And people just can't live with that kind of tax. And obviously, that tax is going to be borne by consumers. And people will go back to the illicit market, the legacy market or whatever you want to call it.
I like the legacy market.
Yeah, they'll go back to the legacy market. And that's dangerous because it's not as safe. And so, I think this is a discussion document. I don't think it's going to go anywhere this session. And perhaps somewhere down the line, if we have more Republicans, both in the Senate, more Democrats in the Senate, it has a little bit of a better chance, but I don't see the 25% tax rate as surviving through all this.
All right. And now everybody's talking about it is a discussion document. It's open to the public by, I believe, September 1st is the date. And I'm guessing, Randall, that your group is preparing to make a comment as a group once you've dissected and analyzed this document. Is that accurate?
Our organization is always looking to give feedback to legislators and making sure that we're participating in the legislative processes for this bill, every bill, and anything we could be looking for there. I know that a lot of our focus is drawing attention to barriers to entry concerns and making sure that we're helping small businesses and helping to make sure that we transition into that federal scheme with a true predictability so that everyone knows what to expect, when to expect it, and frankly, that we're in a position to finally compete with the legacy market as we describe it here. From a California business perspective, there's 3 million legal pounds in the market, give or take a year, and then there's 14 million pounds in the legacy market that gets exported out of the state every year. I know that everyone in my industry is interested in competing with that group of people exporting out those 14 million pounds a year from the same state. That right now the federal government's the only barrier to them competing.
Right.
You know, I recently read an article by a law professor at Vanderbilt. I'm trying to remember his name. At any rate, it was about the Interstate Commerce Act, and it's his opinion that the balkanization of cannabis commerce in the several states is, his name is Mikos, Professor Mikos. You can look it up. And it's his opinion that the balkanization of cannabis commerce in the several states is violative of the Interstate Commerce Clause. And he believes that once the cases make it through the court, that there will be an allowance of interstate commerce. And he talks at the end of the article about how that's going to affect cannabis commerce nationwide. And he talks about MSOs and how it will push out most people except for perhaps craft cultivators. It's a fascinating article, and I would recommend it.
I did take a read of that. That was a very fascinating article from Professor Mikos. Quite an enjoyable read. I'm glad. So I'm a lawyer by trade, and my background before I got into cannabis work was in constitutional law. I did Commerce Clause work. I was an academic on that ground, and I'm glad that now academics and industry is paying attention to those Commerce Clause implications, because that's completely correct. Once it's federally legalized, the Commerce Clause applies, and there's free trade between legal states. That is the baseline of American commerce, and that balkanization is very destructive for long-term interests of the United States. In fact, it's this exact economic issue is why we transferred from the Articles of Confederation to the modern Constitution over balkanization, different standards and weights, and an inability for America to compete with foreign commercial interests over the long run. And that's exactly why. Yeah.
Yeah. And he talks about the interests of the various states in establishing their own commerce. You know, he says one of it is one part of it is economic protectionism. Another is protecting the public health. And those are certainly important aspects for each state. But I got the sense that he didn't think we needed to wait for federal legalization, that he thought that the courts could strike down those protections for the various states. And so we'll have to wait and see what happens with that. I mean, obviously, the courts, at least in Massachusetts, as the first one, legalized gay marriage, and that eventually went nationwide. It may well be that the same thing could happen in cannabis commerce.
Yeah, that would be a fascinating development. I know there's a group out in Oregon. I believe it's either the Oregon Craft Cannabis Association or something along those lines, but they're working on this issue. And I believe some Northeastern governors have also spoken about the possibility of some kind of at least regional cross-border cooperation. That was a while ago. I don't know how long that, how much off the ground that conversation got, but you know, there have been conversations about that. And I think that would be a fascinating prospect if there were interstate commerce before federal legalization. It almost might be preferable when you think about the potential of the federal government mucking up federal legalization. In almost some ways, a lot of people feel it would be preferable to leave this in the state's hands to a large degree.
The senators made it a case that they see this as a state's, they want to turn it back to the states. And you know, that is the big picture of those 163 pages. But when you drill down to those details, and actually, Randall, you're both attorneys. You deal with negotiations all the time. How do you find that middle ground and even identifying what really is the most important thing of this bill? Is it, as Cory Booker reminds us, a social justice bill? Or is it more economical? Is it more about the banking and the taxation and the regulation? Where do you see the win here for the Democrats who are pushing this? Will, I'm going to start with you.
You know, again, I'm not sure there is a win. You know, Randall works with the federal legislation. I've worked for more years than I want to count, 13 and a half years in the state legislature. And there's more of a convivial atmosphere there. Also, we have so few Republicans in both houses of the legislature that, you really don't have to talk to them if you don't want to. I'm disgusted at the, divide in the federal government. And I don't know exactly if there's any common ground at all.
Yeah, that's sad. By the way, guys, last time I checked, we were a democracy and they're supposed to be listening to their populace, but we know that it all has to do with that dollar. Everybody wants a piece of this before it goes legal and explodes, right? Randall, do you see a win? Where is it? What is it? Is it the descheduling? Is it the taxation? Where is there a middle ground anywhere in this?
So I see the win as being a comprehensive bill. I think that at this point, with where the majority leader's position, where the politics and the polling are trending, that is becoming the most popular outcome day by day. Regulate it like alcohol polls at 70, 80%, depending on your state and nationwide. Regulate it and tax it federally polls very similarly. There's just a lot of general consensus for having the same scheme from a consumer perspective that they can for going to a liquor store and buying a bottle of liquor. They understand they don't want it near children. They don't want it advertised towards children, but this is an adult use product. This is also a medical product where it can be medically controlled, and it needs to be controlled in that manner. That's where the polling's trending. Now, politicians are usually behind their constituencies. They like for the constituents to push them to a position, especially as I find it kind of on the Republican side of the aisle, my side of the aisle. They like to make sure the constituents are moving them there. And that is increasingly happening. I mean, if we look at the largest expanding population for medical patients, it is the over 65 community in the state of Florida. And that is a very large, traditionally conservative voting bloc. That is going to influence how these politics play out. So I see the long term of this being, yes, a comprehensive descheduling bill, and something where these tax rates do go down, because those numbers are insanely high. I work with the Cannabis Freedom Alliance on its steering committee, and our recommendation is that there's a total rate of 15% ever as the highest rate that you can put on products, because we are talking about competing with the legacy market. There is a vibrant legacy market in interstate trade all over the United States. And we have to put our legal industry in a position to compete with it. It's that simple. And increasing barriers to entry with too much FDA regulation is something that we want to make sure that we're fighting against, because that doesn't help small businesses. It doesn't help social equity businesses that are undercapitalized to have to pay $400 and change a square foot for an FDA facility off the bat. And those are those details you're getting to that we're trying to make sure we focus on this bill, because the win was the day the majority leader introduced the bill. The public perception where the country is ready to be, that was a huge change. Now we're talking through the details and working to get to 60 with the other party. And that's a whole different political position than we were even 12 months ago. So I'm deeply encouraged by where we're progressing.
And I don't mean to be. Go ahead, Omar.
I was going to say, but one of the things that I'm wondering about is that over the last couple of years, cannabis has declined as this bipartisan issue. I remember, in the 2010s, 2014, 15, 16, it was seen as this bipartisan issue where, again, you had so many. Certainly a lot of Democrats supporting legalization, both inside and outside of politics. On the Republican side, again, the majority, it seemed, of Republican voters, or certainly a significant minority, but I think it's a majority, supported legalization. Also, a surprising number of politicians, Republican politicians, supported legalization. I'm thinking Cory Gardner here, for example, who's now, out in Colorado. But, when we look for, who are the 10 Senate votes that are going to bring this to 60, it seems like it was a lot easier to find, or you certainly come closer a few years ago. And then you also look at some of the losses that cannabis legalization has had in the last year, with some very conservative courts overturning the will of the people. And there, you don't have politicians leading the people. You have them overturning the will of the people. So I think, discussions that we're having in our newsroom is cannabis not less of a bipartisan issue today than it was a few years ago? And I don't know, I'd be interested to hear what panelists say about that. I mean, do we have any hope of regaining some of the Republican support for legalization that seems to have evaporated?
Well, I think.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Will. No, you go. It's always brains before looks.
I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer about all of this. I think cannabis law reform has moved significantly in the states, and I think that it was always the idea that if enough states legalized, then the federal government would move forward. And I think, to some extent that might be happening now. But, when we had the legalization effort in 2016 here in Massachusetts, we had both Republicans and Democrats opposing it. One of the things that I said when we first had, and I was the campaign manager on that campaign, one of the things that I said was, somebody asked me at a press conference, well, what about the governor? What about the attorney general? What about the speaker of the House? And I said, look, every one of those folks has one vote. And we're just going to put it on the ballot and make sure that everybody understands what the issues are, and we'll see how it comes out the other end.
Yeah. And of course, when cannabis is on a ballot question, more people show up to vote than ever before. And to me, that should be something that enters into this equation at some point. But Omar, I'm going to answer your question about what has changed over the last 4 or 5 years. Okay. We have more hate and division in this country right now than I've seen since the 60s. And I was alive in the 60s, and I saw riots and I saw horrible things as I was growing up. I saw my leaders shot. Okay. We survived that, but we're here 50 years later, and we're still seeing more division than we've ever had. And I'm afraid of that. And I see that cannabis is right in the middle of it. In fact, one of the things I say, guys, is, can't we all just sit around a campfire, pass a joint, have a drink, and talk this whole thing out? Because every adult knows that this is an adult product. You're right. The fastest growing demographic users of this plant now is the 50 plus community, the wellness community. You mentioned 65 and in Florida. It can improve your life as you get over. It helps with chronic pain. It helps with anxiety. These things, the problem I maintain, and Randall, you said this magic word, you said advertising. And now advertising is one thing that's a paid message. To me, the lack of a public service message opportunity to talk about, and this happens in the media, the benefits of this plant. You don't have that. So you're still battling the old school and that old reefer madness passion for the other side. How are we ever going to educate the whole world, if you will, about what this plant can do for you from a beneficial standpoint? And look what's happened in Montana. Now, granted, I understand Montana is not a very big state, okay? But you've got a guy there in the state that's regulating no advertising at all for cannabis companies. Now, we're going to let you build a website, but you can't advertise and put your messaging out on social media, and you can't put it out on billboards, and you can't put it out on TV and radio. I mean, how are we going to educate the public that perhaps isn't as enlightened as those on this panel or those on the Democrat side, because they are enlightened enough to see the benefits and how it can improve society? This is my frustration. You guys know this about me. This is why I started this darn network in the first place. We have to have a voice. The people of this industry need a voice to share the frustrations about our government right now, because they're not governing. And David, I think you brought this up. If you say right, I'm going to say left. If you say yes, I'm going to say no, just because we're on opposite sides of the aisle. That's not progress, people. Okay, that doesn't make any sense to me. I rant. I apologize for that, but I get so wound up when I hear the frustrations in all of your voices about the lack of government that's going on right now. And this bill's right in the middle of it. I don't know where we're going to go, to be honest with you. I do know that we're up against the clock a little bit. And I wish, I'll be honest with you guys, I don't rarely do this, but I'm going to extend an invite to any of you, if you'd like to stay on, to join the editor of Leafly, Bruce Barcott, and or Walter Sullivan, who is quite the, actually, Will, I know you know who Walter is, and Omar, I bet you do too. Randall, he's a character up here that was involved with the Alcoholic Beverage Commission for many years. He was involved in the Question 4 committee, I think, in some capacity, Will, wasn't he? Yep. So he'll be joining us. So if you guys want to join us and carry on, you can. If you have another engagement, that's okay. We are up against it right now, so I'm going to take a break. If you can't come back in, you're always welcome here. Okay, every one of you. But wait, David, your hand is up, or is that just your finger?
No, that was Jimmy. We're going to take a break now. Hopefully some of our guests are going to join us when we get into the 5 o'clock session. Dan French, take it away.
All right.
They voted it in and it got overturned by their appellate court, and now it's going to go to the Supreme Court to see whether they can actually even do a voter referendum. And that's something that has to do with the constitutions of individual states. California, is all about the voter referendums. It's something they're allowed to do constitutionally. Other states, especially in the southern states, that's not true because you have a representative democracy there versus more direct democracy in California.
Weed Talk and In the Weeds are two productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
Difference is building a solution for that individual. Not just a custom, here's a box, here's a video, here's how you make your VMS. We custom design and custom build every situation for exactly what the customer needs. And we keep the costs low. We have multiple tiers, as far as what you're looking at on the cost side of things. If you want a one-time, where you just pay one initial cost, we have that. If you want to maintain your system and have the highest protection and highest capabilities and highest upgrades at all times, we have different plans for you. But we scale it so it's scalable and affordable 100%.
Cannabis Media programming is available live and on demand on our Facebook page at Pro Canna Media, on Instagram at Pro Cannabis Media, on LinkedIn also at Pro Cannabis Media, on YouTube and YouTube Live on Pro Cannabis Media, Twitter at Pro Canna Media, and on twitch.tv/Pro Cannabis Media. So like, share, and subscribe to all of our content, newsletters, and shows live or on demand.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.